Binance has announced that it will be appointing Teng, a new leader, to oversee all regional markets. Teng has a long track record in industry and knows how to drive efficiency and growth. This is the perfect opportunity for him to bring his skills to the world of cryptocurrencies. The appointment of Teng is a strategic move by Binance to help the company continue its upward trajectory in the industry. With Teng at its head, Binance is poised to continue its rapid expansion, and the company will be unstoppable in the future. With lightning-fast speed and precision, he is sure to rapidly develop Binance's global presence and provide even more opportunities for its clients in a strongly growing market. This is an exciting time for Binance as it continues its expansion and growth. And with Teng at the helm, there is
that they were engaging in. And, it appears that Binance is wanting to come in here and acquire FTX. But we'll see if that deal goes through. And I think the broader story that, as I think about it, just zooming out, is that over the last few years, companies like Coinbase that are pursuing a trusted and regulated approach, we've been trying to seek regulatory clarity. And sometimes in the absence of that, we've seen customers basically going offshore to these offshore unregulated exchanges. And occasionally we're going to see blowups like this, I think, unless that is resolved somehow. So this is a validation of our strategy that we've been taking for the long term. And I think that's what we've been seeing in these recent markets.
There are big concerns about crypto liquidity and how fickle it is or isn't. How do you prevent liquidity crunches from happening?
Yeah, well, in Coinbase's case, this kind of liquidity crunch is not possible to happen because we're not, investing customer funds. We're not, doing market making or engaged in any kind of complex arrangement with other, parties that we own. It's very simple. We're regulated as a custodian and a brokerage and an exchange. We hold all of the customer assets one-to-one backed. So if customers want to come and withdraw those funds, even 100% of them, that's fine. They can withdraw all of it at once. And as a public company, our financial statements are audited and anybody can go and see them. So these are the kinds of things that I think help make us a trusted platform. And unfortunately, again, in these kind of offshore unregulated exchanges, it's a little unclear exactly how their financial statements are orchestrated and what their relationships are with these other third parties. What's happening with customer funds? Is it being loaned out without their permission? And so hopefully this is a good reminder to everybody that, having trusted companies in the space is what's going to help this space grow over the long term.
So look, analysts are looking at this as, and if the deal goes through, of course, and it hasn't yet, but as a seismic shift in the competitive landscape. How are you thinking about that? Does it mean you'll need to evolve your strategy at all?
No, I don't think our strategy changes here. So, first off, we try not to look at too much of what competitors are doing. We try to just look at what our customers want and focus on that. I also think that, by the way, most of the interactions we have with our competitors in space they're cooperative, they're friendly. We're trying to grow the whole space 100x, and it's not so much a competitive thing most of the time. But that being said, I do think, Binance and Coinbase are taking pretty different approaches. And, we're building in a very trusted, compliant way. We're trying to go get licenses in the countries where we operate. We're also not just a trading platform. We don't think trading is the be-all, end-all of crypto, although we have really good products in that space. The reason I got into this and I got excited about it is I want there to be a more fair and free and global financial system where there's more economic freedom. And so we're enabling people through our products to do all kinds of things with crypto, including, earning a living and paying for things and commerce and remittance and peer-to-peer payments and even accessing Web3 in the world of dApps out there. So we're going to continue to build towards that. Our strategy doesn't change, but I do think this could have an impact in terms of the regulatory landscape and, how policymakers are going to engage with different parties going forward.
Would Coinbase consider buying FTX US?
So, I had a number of conversations with people over the last 24 hours, and there's reasons why that would not make sense, and I'm not quite at liberty to share the details right now. I think I'm going to let other people share that if and when they're ready, or it'll probably all come out eventually. And I think, Binance, I'm sure, is looking at the details of this transaction as well to see if it makes sense for them. But look, we're in a position where we really just want to focus on building our own products. And, it may be a bad situation if this deal doesn't go through for the customers involved. And so I have a lot of sympathy for that. But it's not something where we felt we had the opportunity to come in and acquire that would make sense for us or their customers.
Well, let's talk about the customers. What's your pitch to FTX users about why they should move their funds to Coinbase over Binance?
Yeah. Well, as I mentioned at the beginning, I mean, Coinbase has always taken this approach over the last 10 years of being the most trusted, easiest to use out there. And we've developed this suite of products over time that allows people to come to our platform and not just trade, but do all the other kinds of activity, staking, if they want to participate in that, engaging in commerce, Web3, various things like that. And of course, we serve different customer segments too. We serve regular individual consumers, institutional businesses, and also developers. And I think the core thing is that, there's a lot of things that would cause a customer to choose our platform. But in this exact moment in the market, I think the main thing that's top of mind for them is going to be, are my funds safe? How do I know that? Is this a transparent and regulated firm? Or is this something where I don't have great visibility into it? And what's my counterparty risk? So those are the questions people are probably going to be asking in this moment. And that's probably a good reason why they'd come and look at Coinbase. In fact, we're seeing good inflows and activity on the platform, as you can probably imagine.
Oh, really? You're seeing big inflows right now?
Yes, we're definitely seeing increased activity on the platform there.
How concerned are you that Binance will have too much power over crypto if this deal goes through?
Yeah, I mean, so look, decentralization is one of the big topics in crypto, and it's kind of a core ethos. And so I definitely think there's a risk in any sense of any party having too much control. I don't want to speculate too much on what Binance's role would or would not be, but I think that's up for the market to decide, right? And I think that'll get worked out. I don't have any particular thing that we need to do there, but I do think it's a top of mind thing for everyone in crypto. They don't want any one party to have too much control.
On that note, then, how do you think this will impact crypto regulation in DC, which, as you know, has been very much a work in progress?
Yeah, so we've certainly been big advocates working with policymakers in DC to come to more regulatory clarity, especially around centralized exchanges and custodians and stablecoins. We also think that the innovation potential in DeFi and self-custodial wallets, that needs to be preserved. And I actually think, by the way, those things have the ability to create an even more transparent and trusted financial system going forward, because all of those things are on chain in the open, and you don't have to trust a third party. You can basically trust math and code and yourself to operate in those environments. So it's very important to preserve that potential. But I think one of my big fears and the thing I would caution against is that I think some people in DC may be tempted to say, hey, this is why we need more stringent regulation. And I guess my pushback to that would be these exchanges are operating largely offshore, unregulated. It was not because of proposed regulation here in the US or in any other major market. The issue here is that most of the regulators have been too focused on onshore companies that are basically trying to play by the rules, like Coinbase. And that's fine to focus somewhat there. But meanwhile, the customers were going to these offshore unregulated exchanges, and the regulators basically were not sanctioning that activity or preventing it from happening. And so we're seeing that risk now emerge. So I think the regulatory proposals that are in motion, like the DC CPA bill going through Congress, these are heading in the right direction. Some of the language needs to be thought more closely, especially around DeFi. But if that kind of stuff comes to fruition, that'll be good. Then we just need to enforce a level playing field for the whole industry. And that's the part that has not been happening to date. And just to give you one statistic, right. If you look at spot and futures volume, more than 95% of that crypto activity, that trading volume has actually moved outside of the US. And I think it's largely been due to that lack of regulatory clarity.
What happens if this deal doesn't go through, Brian? What then?
Well, it does appear that some customers of FTX would be taking losses, and that's not a good thing for anybody. And then I think the industry, needs to think about how to go on from there. And again, seek that clear regulation, get the level playing field that's enforced equally around the world. And, companies succeed, companies fail. That's part of capitalism. It happens in traditional finance as well. But it doesn't mean that the whole traditional economy gets called into question. So the same thing is true here in crypto. It just means we need to keep building better systems and have that regulatory clarity for the centralized actors.
Sam Bankman-Fried has been a huge political donor, big presence in Washington. Do you think he loses some credibility as a result of this?
I mean, it's hard to imagine that he wouldn't. I mean, that's a very difficult situation where, I actually think he was very passionate and articulate in many of these meetings. He drove the conversation forward, and I give him credit for that. But there's probably a lot of people in DC right now kind of scratching their head, feeling like they got duped or deceived by this person who may have not had things exactly in order. And I don't know exactly how that happened and how he ended up in that.
Billionaire buddies.
Yeah, I went down to FTX's offices in the Bahamas in February and wrote a pretty positive story about FTX. Totally missed all the red flags. And so now I returned a couple weeks ago to try and figure out what really happened. And I really wasn't sure what to expect. Honestly, Bankman-Fried seemed quite similar to how he did the first time. I wasn't quite sure. It took me a while to figure it out. Like, was he delusional? I mean, his $32 billion exchange just blew up. But I realized that he was really on this kind of apology tour, and that he is pursuing this weird strategy of just instead of clamming up, just like talking so much about what happened to try and spread like his preferred version of it.
Right. And there's a line in here in which you talk about one of your interactions, and you ask him, you misplaced $8 billion. And he says almost proudly, misaccounted. Did you get the sense that he really firmly believed that this was just an oopsie in risk management, despite the fact that, as you point out in the story, he was an MIT grad. He was at Jane Street, a relatively prestigious Wall Street firm. I mean, this was a guy who was good with the numbers.
Right. He's like an expert trader. He majored in physics at MIT, but he's basically saying, like, if you want to believe his version of the story, you have to believe that he essentially forgot that people sent him $8 billion, then gambled it away unknowingly. And it's very hard to believe. I had trouble following his story, and once I figured it out, it didn't make much sense to me. This is clearly a guy who cares a lot about money, who thinks about it all the time. So the idea, even if it was to give it away, he still wanted to make his pile really big. The idea that he never took a minute to try and like count his money, figure out his company's accounting. I mean, I guess it's possible, but it just seems really implausible to me.
Yeah, he seems to have no aptitude at all for numbers in his in the last few interviews that I've watched. And it's odd that he's even giving interviews in the first place. Why do you think he continues to talk to the media so much while notably staying out of the U.S. jurisdiction when his lawyers must be telling him, stop talking?
I think the media helped build him up to played a big role in creating his image as like the only honest guy in crypto. And I don't think it's crazy that for him to think, hey, they helped me out on the way up. Now I can talk my way out of trouble. And he told me that when I asked him that he probably would testify before Congress. I'm surprised that he's not going to. Presumably he could even do it by Zoom. I wouldn't be surprised to see him there, because he's been talking to almost everyone who called, and it seems like he could just give them the same story that he's been telling the press.
All right, well, we'll see if he shows up. That hearing is a week